Alright, I wanted to describe this dream that I had a while ago that uh, I haven't mentioned, and I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to describe this dream. Um, Probably happened like between 4 and 5 months ago, but I don't think I ever told. Well, I know I've told a lot of people that I know in real life, but I just figured I'd make a video of it for random whoyos on the internet. And that was that I went to the North Pole. It was a vacation. It was back in time, and we used to go on vacations a lot. Uh, Me, my parents, and sometimes my brother. We went to the North Pole, and they had this big building built over it. It was like going. It was like a vacation with the same feeling as going to like the Museum of Natural History. It was like a learning vacation, like going on a retreat at school feeling. And they had this really big building, and the most memorable room of it was the room that had it was lined with seats so people could watch. People put their faces into this. They let you willingly come up to this beam of light. It was the magnetic pole of the Earth, and it was like this big around, and there was like a hole in the floor that was like if this is the beam of light, the hole in the floor was this big around, and the hole went down. It went down into the center of the Earth, and the beam went all the way through the Earth. And the beam, there was a hole in the ceiling, and the beam went like up out of through the ceiling. It was really bright. Even it was broad daylight when I was there. Even in broad daylight, you could see this beam of light go like up into the sky as far as you could see something this big around go with the naked eye. Like it was a solid object. It was still that bright. In real life, it would have hurt our eyes to look at. We would have needed like special welding goggles or something to look at this. But in the dream, it was, just a dream, so it didn't hurt my eyes. And in the dream, it was the magnetic pull of the Earth. It was like it looked like it was about to be like a gamma ray burst. And there was some sort of activity that was going, and it was attracting people. They didn't, it was unexplainable activity. In real life, they'd probably bar anyone from going there, and keep this kind of thing away from public eyes. But in the dream, people had the freedom to go and check it out, and so there's this room of people sitting on benches around. And then there's people that have the balls to go up and put their faces in the beam. And everybody that went up and looked in the beam said that they could see down into the Earth. They could see that there were planets rotating inside, like around the beam. There was light. The beam was lighting up the inside of the Earth. The inside of the Earth was hollow. And they could see like way down into the Earth. It was clear, and these people would be holding their faces in the beam describing this. They're like, it's amazing. There's a planetary system down there. There's plenty of light. The Earth is hollow, and they're describing this like it's the most amazing thing they've ever seen. And then they said there'd be spaceships and like all kinds of like activity, robotic activity, and things they couldn't describe, and then they'd pull their face out of there, and then they'd be blind. They'd be blind, and they couldn't see this world, but they could see this other world. They could see the world of the Bodox. And the Bodox is something this is something else entirely. This would be like another video where I take tapentadol and I see in the dark, in the pitch dark, I see these things that are in the room, and I've done this with friends. They see them too. I've done this with Timmy, Craig, Keith, Lee. I've done this with 5 other friends. They've all been able to see these things. They're things that you can only see in the pitch dark on tapentadol mixed with Benadryl, or tapentadol. You can see them on LSD too. but there are these things that like dance around the room. They do all this weird shit. I have several videos describing them in the pitch dark, like at least 8. So in the dream, those things were, they'd be blind to this world. They couldn't, they were blind. They couldn't see, but they could see the dark. And they could see the Bodox. And so one after the other person, like one person would do that, and they'd be like, "You've got to see this. There's this whole other world. There's these like things surrounding us," and they'd be all ecstatic. And one at a time, one person would do it, and then the one person would like barely be able to influence another person to get up. Like one of the spectators, one of the people that are skeptical, and I was one of those people. I didn't want to do it. I didn't want to go blind, but another person, it's like one person would do it, and then there'd be one person watching. They'd be like, all right, I'm going to do this. And they'd look, and they'd be like, it's the most, and then they'd be just like the other person, like, it's the most amazing thing I've ever seen. You guys have no idea what you're not seeing. And then they'd go blind, and then they'd be like seeing these, they're like explaining these things that are in the room. And I knew that like what they were saying was real, but I didn't know like what it, like, because I have memories from real life where I know of the Bodox and I know their realness, but in the dream I was unaware of that. But because of like the memories that I have in real life that I was like suspended from knowing in the dream, I knew that they were telling the truth, and that, I really wanted to do it. And in the dream, after I woke up from this, I regretted not doing it. Had I known it was just a dream, I would have done it. So this second person would be looking in there, and they'd be like, and then they'd be blind, and then they'd be like really ecstatic about it, and then someone would finally get up, and there was like, at least 20 people like standing around the walls, sitting on benches, watching these people do this. And then, another person would get up, the third person would get up, and then they'd do it. And I think it was either the third or the fourth person. At about the third or the fourth person, the Bodox, the people that were still in the room that weren't blind, that could still see this world, saw these things, these ethereal beings come up out of there, and they were ethereal, so we couldn't interact with them. They were going through stuff. They were going through the desks and through walls and stuff, and they had these Rubik's cubes, and they'd set them down on the ground about 12 to 15 feet apart from each other, cube, in squares. So there'd be like a cube here, a cube 15 feet that way, a cube 15 feet that way. And then from that cube, there'd be another cube, 15 that way, 15 that way, 15 that way, 15 that way. So it was like a square grid of these cubes that they were setting down. It looks like Rubik's cubes, and they were ethereal at first. But the ethereal cubes formed into real cubes, and they started growing these swords, these sharp objects. It reminded me a lot of the scene from Terminator 2, when John Connor's like, hey, how's Wolfie? And she's like, Wolfie's fine. Wolfie's just fine. And then she switches hands. She switches the phone to her other hand. And then her arm turns into a long knife. And then you see that it's going through John Connor's father's face, like right through his mouth, through the milk carton. It reminded me of that. These objects were like, they were like metal, but they were black. They were black, but they were just like that sword that would just get longer and sharper that the T-1000 had, and they'd go in all sorts of different directions. It wasn't just one sword. The cube was like turning into like each cube would turn into like this, swords that would go in every direction, even into the ground. It was like turning into this like long, sharp thistle. They were like those with thistle weeds that have like sharp spikes going in every direction. Just imagine the center of that as a cube, and the spikes are getting sharper and sharper on the thistles. And everyone in the room was, since they went through the walls, the Bodox, the things that came out of the ground, they were aliens. I just call them Bodox because that's what we call the ones in real life. Anything ethereal that can do that and pass through stuff is a Bodox. They went through the walls. They went through outside, and they put them outside. They were putting these things everywhere. They were like covering the world in these things, not just the room with us. So they covered the whole surface of the planet with these things. But I died long before that happened, and everybody else in the room, because these swords that were in the room, they started in that room. So the first people to die because of them was us, because that's where they came out of, was through the hole in the beam. The magnetic beam was coming through a hole in the earth, was like this big around. The beam was like this big around, so there was like 6 inches of room outside the perimeter of the beam. It came up through there. Out of their ecosystem, I guess we disturbed it. The people disturbed it, but they didn't want to be known or something, down in the center of the earth. So they came up and they dealt with the surface nuisance, which was us. Putting these little cubes everywhere, and they growing these swords. Everyone in the room was running out of room, like, oh fuck, there's these swords, and there's just less and less room to be. And then I was watching people that were dying even before me, just like slowly getting impaled, like by these swords that were just going through. And then for me, I remember specifically the swords were going through like right here and right here, and I was just like, and then I woke up like, holy shit. And then like, since I died, I think I was having adrenaline. I think my body was actually producing adrenaline in real life from that dream, because I woke up like, and I remembered it vividly. I think when you die, like in a slow, but like, you're fucked situation in the dream. I knew I was fucked, but I could like see it coming for like a good 30, 40 seconds. Like I could see like the swords growing everywhere, and I was just thinking everyone in the room's panicking. Nobody could think of anything to do. There was nowhere to go, so you just had to like kind of wait around for these like little black swords from every direction to stab you to death. And since I thought that I was awake, because that's how dreams are, they like suspend you. Dreams give you like amnesia. They like cut you off from like knowing that you're just laying in a bed somewhere in the next dimension above them, which is really weird. But it was like I must have been like layers and layers deep in REM to have this dream, because it was a vivid dream. Most of my dreams, I just kind of remember after I wake up, and then I forget them during the day. Some of them are like really serious, life-changing dreams. This one was one of those. This one was like one of those ones that I remember like days and days later, like it's a real memory from this world, not just a foggy-ass dream memory. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that dream, because it was, I don't know, it's on the back of my mind every now and then. I wish I could go back and watch it again, like a movie. Maybe in the future we'll be able to do that.